Okay, let's sew our sleeve to our body. You will want your pieces with the right side facing up. This happens to be my front. This happens to be my back. You can see the shoulder seam. This is my safety pin. I've used an extra big stitch marker for purposes of this video so you can see what I have identified as the beginning of my seam. And of course on the other end I've got another one placed. That's where my sleeve will end up. Again, this is my front and this is my back. When I sew the other sleeve to my body, it will be reversed. So the procedure is the same no matter if this is the front or the back. So let's begin. We now have our sleeves set up, ready to sew to the body. It is perpendicular to the body of the sweater. Here's that little center portion that we marked at the end of our sleeve. This is going to line up with our shoulder seam. And we had that nice long tail that we have threaded. We're ready to begin. I have in my hand the body of my sweater marked with the safety pin to indicate the beginning of my sleeve seam. I'm going to take the tail that's attached to the top of my sleeve. I've threaded it with my tapestry needle, and I'm going to begin sewing. I'm going to go enter in from the top going down where the hole where my safety pin is, and pick up 2 rows or 2 bars. And I would like to clarify, I've left an entire stitch up at the top. That will offer you the best looking seam. If I go any lower, boy, that's way too bulky. And if I go any higher, that's very skimpy. This will give you the optimal look. Just going to place it 1 row down, or 1 stitch down. Grabbing those 2 rows or bars, I am now going to work up to the top. And again, the placement here is right the row above the bind off row. And here I am going to pick up an entire stitch and a half. So that is going to look like 3 bars in a row. Now, similar to your shoulder seam, I'm going to enter the same exact hole that I just came out of on the bottom. And I'm going to find my 2 bars. Boy, they're kind of tangled together here, but there they are, 2 bars. 2 rows, and pulling my yarn through. Going back up top, there's an entire stitch right here, but we have to add the bar from the other stitch next to it. 3 bars in total. There we go. Back to the bottom portion, entering where I came out of, picking up 2 rows, 2 bars, and back up top again. Just came out of this stitch. There's my entire stitch plus a bar. Pick that up. Let's pull this tight now to avoid tangling. Not too tight as to pucker. And we'll continue. There's your 2 bars. And up top, we have a stitch and a half. And you will continue in this manner all the way to the other safety pin, but I would like to address that center seam portion, so we will, upon reaching that, go over that section. Looks very nice. You're well on your way. I am now approaching the center of my sleeve, and the goal, of course, is to match it up with the center of the shoulder seam. the shoulder seam itself. So let's see what I've got going here. I've just picked up on the top. I'm going to grab my 2 stitches on the bottom, 2 rows on the bottom, going back on top. And if I were to pick up a 1.5 stitches as the protocol indicates, I would be a 1/2 stitch shy of meeting that center mark. So there's a couple things I can do. I can ignore it. It's only a 1/2 stitch and just include that on my next pickup. Or I can pick this up now and even things out right away. I think for the purpose of this video, that's what I'm going to do. So as you can see, I've got 2 full stitches rather than a 1.5 stitches, and that will even things out. Now I'm right on the money. You are going to find that it does not always match up exactly. In fact, the opposite can happen. Perhaps your marker comes in right about here. You have to do the opposite. Instead of a 1.5 stitches, just pick up 1 stitch to even things out. It's not the end of the world, and quite frankly, will probably be more of the norm than it coming out exactly correct. So just use your best judgment and know that things will still work out just fine. Your sleeve will look nice. Either way. I'm going to cut this little pink string now because it's kind of in my way. Let's get rid of it. I'm going to go back to the bottom portion and pick up. It's rather bulky right here. It's right in the center of that seam, right in the thick of it. So just do your best. It's not as clear cut, but it will be bulky. So I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to go back to my norm of a 1.5 stitches. There we have it. Go back to the norm here of 2 rows, 2 bars, and continue on. And you do want to make sure that does match up no matter how you have to achieve it, because if you do not, it will not come out evenly when you get to the end of your sleeve and your stitch marker at the other end of the body. But there you have it. Looks very nice. Continue on all the way down to the end. I am now approaching my last marker. Pick up my 3 bars, back down to 2, pick up 3 again, pick up. Looks like I just have the 1 bar left. Great, because up on the top I've got 2 bars left. I'm just going to pick up the 1. Oops. I think that ended up pretty well. My seam looks nice, not too tight. You do want to pull it a little bit just to make sure you haven't left anything loose, but not too tight. Now all that is left is to simply turn your work and work your thread through on your seam, and you're done. But doesn't that look nice? And again, let's remove this. Here's your seam. I ended up at the top, so now I'll just work through on the bottom. Just really grabbing anything that my needle can get through. That was once that way. Again, not too tight. You don't want that to be too scrunched up. It'll be very noticeable. Turn your work once again. Work that thread in going this direction. And you can cut that off. What a good feeling. Beautiful.